So, one of the things I found really interesting out there on YouTube is a lot of people will read a book and they'll talk through it to help maybe themselves understand it, but also help others understand the book and get exposed to new thinking. One of the books that I've been reading that I really like is this book, Boston Consulting Group on Strategy. Importantly, a lot of this comes from Bruce Henderson, who I think is the founder of BCG. And I realized there's not much out there around business books, at least that I've seen. Most of what I've seen have been really around philosophy, actually. So I thought we'd do this. We'd read this together. I've been enjoying it, and I'm just going to touch on a few excerpts. We'll do one chapter per video as we really just explore this and learn together. So to jump right in, the first chapter is the experience curve reviewed. History. And so, we'll start with the first paragraph. Experience curve is the name applied in 1966 to overall cost behavior by the Boston Consulting Group. The name was selected to distinguish this phenomenon from the well-known and well-documented learning curve effect. The two are related, but quite different. So as I understand, one of the interesting things is you have the learning curve, which really talks about the cost of producing a marginal item, the additional item that you're producing. This is really, really important inside of factory or other kind of areas where you're producing actual widgets. And you can think about the value of scaling and how that might help you. Okay, but the experience curve is a different lens, and we'll get into this a lot more. It's essentially saying that as you get more experience, you get better at what you do, which means that the cost comes down. This feels simple at the base, but it actually becomes really meaningful over time with the implications of what comes out of this. And we'll talk about this, but things like market share being really important, more important than, for example, margin upfront. So we'll jump in. It has been known for many years that labor hours per unit decline on repetitive tasks. This effect was particularly easy to observe in such things as aircraft production in wartime, as the rate of labor decrease was characteristically approximately 10 to 15% per doubling of experience. And so this expectation has long been part of military contracting. So just sort of establishing, hey, this has been happening in this learning curve in particular, and that with every 10 to 15%, you have a cost reduction with every doubling of experience. So you go from 1 year to 2 years, you can expect 10 to 15%, 2 years to 4 years, something like that. Okay? So jumping down, the Boston Consulting Group's first effort to formulate the experience curve concept was an attempt to explain cost behavior over time in a process industry. Long continued, successful cost reduction by the client had resulted only in the company's survival as a marginal competitor. The correlation between competitive profitability and market share was strikingly apparent. The pattern of the learning curve was an attractive initial hypothesis to explain this. The company was chasing its larger competitors down the cost curve. And so this is essentially exploring, hey, this company was getting more and more experience. They were learning, they were getting better, but they were, a lesser company within the market. And so as they got better and their costs came down, everyone else in the market's cost was coming down, and the leader's cost in particular was coming down. And we'll get into this later, but likely they were coming down faster than anybody else's. So they explore this in a few different other areas, TVs, semiconductors, and then they kind of summarize it right here. It says, in one pattern, prices in current dollars remain constant for long periods and then begin a relatively steep and long continued decline in constant dollars. In the other pattern, prices in constant dollars decline steadily at a constant rate of about 25% each time accumulated experience doubled. That was the experience curve in 1966. What's fascinating, this one, we'll get into this later, is that sometimes you essentially have to work at it a little bit and keep putting more and more experience into something, and it kind of goes flat and then starts dropping your costs. Other times it starts dropping right away. So as they sort of started working with clients, proven the universality, they've proven, so work with clients since 1966 has proven the universality of the experience curve relationships. A real understanding, however, required many, many client assignments. So they worked with different clients, proved their universality, and they've been really deeply understanding it the more and more they've worked with different clients. And again, this is where the bulk of the book is. So this is the introduction, it's a history. And so, questions that they sort of had was, what's an appropriate unit of experience where the product itself changes? What is the relationship between experience effects on similar but different products, such as semiconductors? So one of the earlier things we skipped is color TVs versus black and white. And does black and white flow into color? How are technological changes integrated into experience effects? What effect does capital investment intensity have? And does the same effect appear in overhead and marketing functions? So these are all amazing questions that we will explore in subsequent videos. And one of the things they note is accounting data is frequently misleading for cost analysis. The choice of treatment as expense versus capital can distort apparent cost change. Over time, the experience curve has become recognized as essentially a pattern of cash flow. The average cost is, by definition, the total expenditure divided by the total output. The unit cost is the rate of change in that ratio. Projection of this relationship is frequently both simpler and more accurate for cost forecasting than even the most elaborate conventional accounting analysis. So one of the things they're doing is they're sort of building on or moving away from the specific marginal unit of cost and sort of saying, hey, let's just look at the average cost divided by the average let's look at the average expenditure, the total expenditure by the total output. So instead of saying, hey, this specific item that we produced is this much and this much went into it, say we spent all this money and we had this much result. And that's the average cost. And so this, they feel, and I think probably accurately, captures the overall value of the experience curve and what it does. And I think is especially relevant as we think about the software industry, because there's a lot of sort of marginal cost to produce, and to sell an additional widget is zero, essentially. Not perfectly zero, but that next sign up, that 1 millionth sign up, that 1 millionth and 2 sign up, that 10th sign up, they're really roughly similar. But if your total expenditures versus your total output, and you see a shift there where the output's going up, it's huge. It's really valuable. And so, one of the things I want to show is they have this great graph that actually shows General Electric, Westinghouse, Allis-Chalmers, and the basically cost per megawatt compared to the cumulative megawatts that were produced. And so it might be hard to see on video, but you can actually generally see that the cost and experience even pass through firms in a sense, right? So as the industry itself gets more experience, the costs come down as well. So that's the chart. How do we do this? There you go. These are the different shapes. The dark filled in circle, the empty circle, and the triangle are these different companies. So to wrap it up, these last few paragraphs really summarize the importance of what we're going to get into. The experience curve is a contradiction of some of the most basic assumptions of classic economic theory. All economics assumes that there's a finite minimum cost that is a function of scale. This is usually stated in terms of all cost over volume curves being either L-shaped, right? L-shaped or U-shaped. And it is not true except for a moment in time, which they're saying you can continually bring your cost down. So in tech, we think about this as the Moore's law, but they're saying it's true generally. And the whole concept of a free enterprise competitive equilibrium assumes that all competitors can achieve comparable costs at volume. So, competitor A that's 3-4 times bigger than competitor B can compete equally to competitor A is a fundamental belief that we have. And so it's not true either. Our entire concept of competition, antitrust, and non-monopolistic free enterprise is based on a fallacy that the experience curve effect is true. The experience curve effect can be observed and measured in any business, in any industry, for any cost element, anywhere. So this is thinking about 1966, it's true today in 2023 for software businesses, for semiconductors, for AI. all businesses. Most of the history of insight into experience curve effect and its significance is still to be written. I think that's true today. So I'm really excited to get into this. I think the impact of the experience curve flows through so many ways as you think about building a company and how you build a startup. Implications that we'll get into, but should you extract value as much as possible versus should you deliver value that allows you to grow? Should you believe that your general cost will come down? Will you be able to deliver the product you're delivering cheaper in whatever way? Will your marketing get cheaper? Many of these things, as you grow, do you get better at what you do? And if so, what does that mean? And specifically, is less a function of time and more about essentially customers. So the more customers you have, the more it grows. So I'm excited to get into this with all of you. This is a teaser. Maybe it was fast, so maybe we'll cover a couple of chapters down the road. But looking forward to it.